everybody doing? Well, all things considered. Happy Thursday, welcome to Text Adventure Thursday. Today we're going to talk about Far Sector Issue 2, and then we're going to play some King's Quest. King's Quest 4, 80s classic. Hi, Serotonia, Dread Pirate Robert, John Numa, Dark of Nate, Library Liz, Star Pilot 6, Green Thing LP, Key Squared, Leia Sky, Meaning of Night, Mikey Glinsky, Jersey Girl List, J Sutton 94, Triamus, I think I did Star Pilot 6 already, Obsequious Diphthong, Lemonator, Feathers Flight, Mikey Glinsky, Dark of Nate, Tantaralus, Librarian Liz, Heart of Handprints, Zenith, Parasaur. Meaning of Night says, I'm still living for this book background. I'm so in love with it. Mom could not have known when she got me this that she was creating an incredible solution for me. Chandra has just resubbed for 28 months. Another wonderful anniversary. Thank you for being a bright spot in a rather bleak world at the moment. I hope that we can all be that for each other. I'm so glad you all are here. These are, I mean, there's nothing in my lifetime to remotely compare to what is going on right now. But I'm hoping that with things that are worse than we can imagine, maybe there will be things that are better than we can imagine. I know it doesn't necessarily mathematically work like that, but you don't know it doesn't. This just in. Amy likes books. Sarah Tony says, in these dark, crazy times, sometimes you need to read about space murder. And yeah, we are, we'll get into it in one sec. Blue Lynette says, finally getting to isolate starting today. Dread Pirate Robert says, Twitch is a lifesaver right now. Honestly, I'm going to try to add more streams, lengthen streams if I can, because I feel very lucky to have something that I can still do while trying to practice social distancing and help keep everybody as safe as possible. So thank you all for being here, and I hope... just hoping for the best for all of us. Heart of Handprints went on Comixology yesterday when you realized you'd be home for book club this week, and Impulse bought 2, 3, and 4 of Far Sector. Okay, we're talking only about issue 2 today, so those of us who have read further, we're going to try to segment our brains. But Heart of Handprints loving it so much. Can we talk about this great book? Like, Jemison and Campbell, why are you so good? It does feel like Jamal Campbell is so unreasonably good. So expressive. So good at the design and the acting and the emotion and the layouts and all of it. How? Meaning of Night says apparently Comixology is extending their unlimited trial period. Unlimited is their library-esque service to 60 days, so get on that. And if folks, as usual, please, let's keep comparing notes, comparing resources. Canopy, Hoopla, is it Overdrive or is that the one that got renamed to Hoopla or Libby for libraries? Sharing your best tips, free Audible downloads. Sarah Tony says, Jackbox was also very fun today. I had a great time today guesting on Lasers. Laser from the Double Clicks was doing a stream, and we all played some Jackbox party games, and it was so much fun. And if you haven't checked it out yet, the Double Clicks have a Kickstarter going right now for a musical concept album. I'm so excited about it. How to Parent Prince says, I only read issue 2 today, just ready to continue. Oh, nice. Perfect. Overdrive became Libby. Got it. Meaning of Night says the expressions in this book were great. Which is great because part of the mystery involves Joe picking up on the way people behave, right? Which you might imagine might be something difficult to get across. It's one of those, you have so much less space with which to establish that than you might in like 2 hours of looking at faces or hundreds of pages of words about things. But you also get the gift of sort of communicating through imagery and making us draw our own conclusions. So, for instance, there's a big thing that happens right at the end of issue 2, and there are a lot of clues dropped in the couple of pages leading up to it, but some of them are visual and some of them are in the narration. Kurigari says, I love Green Lantern. This looks pretty cool. I find it to be very cool, yeah. All right, so from here on out, very lower deck episode, it was great. Many more big facial expressions in this issue. All right, from here on out, we are spoilers for issue 2 of, I'm not going to have a hold-up copy because I did this one on my iPad. I have 3 and 4. But, I'm Chubby Bunny's not following. Hey, Michelle! How's it going? Do you stream? Everybody follow I'm Chubby Bunny. Our wonderful friend, Michelle and Bradley, who you've seen be very funny and charming, or someone with her exact name. If I could get a caster command for I am Chubby Bunny, just in case you stream. You know, because you should, because you're great. All right. Back on topic. We're reading issue 2 of Green Lantern, of the Green Lantern comic Far Sector, about original Lantern Sojourner Mullen, and we are spoilers as of now. All right, y'all. There have now been 2 murders. The second suspect got away, and a certain counselor is turned on his emotions, and possibly the way I phrased that makes me want to finish it with a dirty joke, because there's a lot of things going on. He might have also turned on his Green Lantern, yes. I had to finish it myself, I'm sorry. But she does keep noting that he's a problem, and he's more of a problem than we ever imagined. Atari Bingo says, this is a twofer for me. Huge Green Lantern fan and fan of yourself. Oh, thank you. Serotonia says, I love Joe, our disaster by lantern, that is all. Because in this issue, I love the way they do this, right? They set up the world and the mystery and some personality, and then in issue 2, we're immediately into the emotional hooks. So Sizzin of the Cliffs and Marth, the counselor, both cuties. Both cuties, and both flirty cuties. So we find out that Joe and the peace captain, Sizzin, tried it. Didn't work out. Extenuating circumstances. But we get one of my favorite little storytelling bits in this where Joe's like, it's fine, I don't even care. I'm pretending to like your horrible coffee. So there's clearly some feelings there. Although, man, getting involved with someone who doesn't have emotions in this particular, they have been suppressed and you are not used to it phase would be a learning curve. And Mikey Glinsky, a flying superhero, is scared of heights, or at least not great at flying yet. So that's a question. How long, it didn't take nearly a year for her to love her new world and her new job, right? That's what we learn. Also, inconveniently hot, says Key Squared. Dark of Nate says, I've got the variant cover where Joe's sitting at home and has a Jon Stewart Funko on her end table. It's so beautiful. So the question is, how long exactly has she been here? How much training did she get? Who is this person that gave her this unusual ring? Meaning of Night says, especially since our peace captain does have lots of feelings, they're just suppressed. John Newman says, this issue was so good. Yeah, first, overall takes. How are you liking issue 2? Are you surprised by the way it's going? Is Joe getting hugs? She seems in need of hugs, says Serotonia. Atari Pinko says, so happy to see some Afrofuturism in the DC universe. Aleph Sharp says, so good. Shiny Marigold says, also, I love her expression in the scene where Sizzin is foregrounded, and in the background, Joe, who's trying the coffee, is making face. It's so funny. Zather says, well, they clearly still have emotions. They're just turned down to really low volume. But from their music and art and dance, I think emotional expression still finds a way. I took a bunch of notes on this one because we got a few very important speeches. And that's a great way to reveal character and to build the world, is these little monologues that we get. I think we got sort of 3 really key speakers presenting their viewpoint on the world in this episode, right? In addition to Joe as our primary speaker, directly addressing us at the opening of this issue, to sort of recap events for us, which I loved. She pulls up a chair and starts telling us what's what. But there are 3 character speakers who get these little monologues. The first one being Averup Thorne. The second one, for me, I think, being Sizzin making the coffee. And the third one being Marth at the end, which, of course, goes a lot of places. So to drill in on Sizzin, the peace captain at first, I loved this emotion speech. First of all, she vehemently denies that she would ever be on Switch Off. The Switch Off, we've learned now, and you have to kind of keep track of this. The peoples of these worlds destroyed their worlds in horrible war. In some fashion, all agreed to turn off their emotions to try to survive. That's called the emotion exploit. It's genetically coded for at least 2 out of 3 of the species. For the Catopli, the sort of plant carnivores, and for the the winged fantasy creatures. I love, by the way, Aleph Sharp's framing from last time of sort of the fantasy side, the sci-fi side, and the horror side is really helping me keep track of them and their influences as well. So I thought that was brilliant. So the Na and the Catopli have the emotion exploit, and the exploit means basically dimming of the emotions, right? And there is a drug that has recently gotten wild in the system called Switch Off. It switches off the emotions, which means, or the exploit, which means it switches on your emotions, essentially. So on Switch Off means having feelings, and with potentially deadly consequences. So Peace Captain Sisson would never touch the nasty stuff, Switch Off, the illegal drug. Or at least claims she wouldn't. But, my inner detective said, I believe her. I believe her in that moment. Aleph Sharp cheered. Bazone Avian Army. Aw, thanks. By the way, just wanted to say I have some water-damaged versions of issues 1 through 4, which have since been replaced. They're readable and the art is intact. If anyone would like them for book club, I'm happy to send them to you if you can pay for shipping. That is a beautiful offer. If there is anyone who'd want to take Aleph up on that, I think maybe Discord would be the best place to coordinate that. Obviously, be careful sharing info. You all seem pretty trustworthy to me. Obsequious Diphthong liked the contrast between at work Sisson and relaxed in-home Sisson. But what I meant to bring up here was, I loved Sisson's speech that gives us our first look at, what is it like for the people living with the emotion exploit? And she is afraid, essentially, of the idea of what it would be like. Because she's already afraid of what she feels. Such rage, such sadness. But she says, just a hint, muted, but it's enough to scare her. She says, I regret not being given a choice about it, but I'm grateful for the strength it lends me. And she says to Joe that she's in awe of the way Joe goes through life just trusting yourself. And then Joe gets a real significant look. So the question of, is Sisson right? Does Joe trust herself with her emotions? She trusts them enough, obviously, not to ask for the emotion exploit. But, what's the background there? Has Joe always trusted herself? Does she trust herself? Does she think it's moving or sad or interesting that that's how Sisson sees her? So I loved that speech and the way it highlighted trying to explain to us, the audience, what this experience of having the emotion exploit is like. Green Thing LP says, Green Lantern in, Planet of the Speculative Fiction. Honestly, I think all Green Lantern stories are kind of that, and that's what I love about it. Atari Pico says, this also clinched how good the art in this series is for me. The art style is gorgeous, says Mikey Linsky. Atari Pico says, suggests a consistent aesthetic, which I'm all here for. M4 In says, loving how the art is using color to emphasize elements instead of heavy line work. I love the combination. Star Pilot 6 says, you're leaving out the most important, the Na grandparent. I love the Na grandparent. If the Na grandparent turns out to be the secret villain of this whole thing, my heart will be broken. Let's see. Dark of Nate says, this was notably a much more visually narrated issue than the first. There are several pages here that are just images telling a story in sequence. Sequential art is one of my favorite names for what comics are and what they do. So I love that. Mikey Glinsky says, surprised at the type of world building. Issue 1 was like, here's the world. While issue 2 was like, here's what it's like living in it. Which I love because essentially the crisis in issue 1 is someone has been murdered, the whole world is falling apart. But even to try to figure out what's going on, you first have to find out who these people are and what makes them tick. It's sort of classic, gotta put in the work, gumshoe detective-y stuff. Meaning of Night points out the important note. Also, Joe continues to serve all the looks. The suit she wears to intro the story at the beginning of this. Serotonia says, this is my second ever superhero comic. This is very good. Shiny Marigold says, I'm enjoying this book so much. I'm reading backwards, just so you know. Green Thing LP, it's going good. Good character work, both writing and art. Star Pilot 6 says, I liked it, but it didn't have quite the same punch for me as 1. Maybe because we're settling into things, and it isn't as much novelty. That's an interesting thing about an issue 2. If they keep throwing things at you at the same pace they did, it might be overwhelming. On the other hand, you don't want to lose everybody's sense of urgency and propulsion and amazement. Lemon Eater says, on Far Sector, I'm getting a distinct voice and literary approach. Who is speaking is important, and to whom. They laced that into the first issue, so I'm very curious how that's going to pay off as we go. Leia Sky says, I loved it! Alright, I caught up there, so now I'm skimming back down again. Sather says, I also like on that cover she's reading a Black Lightning fanfic. I did not notice that. That's amazing. Fluffy Butt is having trouble with the book because there is no audio version. It is one issue with the accessibility of comics is the difficulty of sort of, you know, putting the equivalent of subtitles on them. Sinfully Wicked just resubbed for 10 months. Isolated Enthusiasm. Thank you, Sinfully Wicked. Skimming back down. Dark of Nate says, I wasn't sure what to make of the Catopli at first. Those are the plant carnivores. But now I'm thinking of them kind of like the Kindred from Vampire the Masquerade. Feelings, I said disastrous results, and now I see Zather said, or with potentially sexy results. Yep. Mikey Glinsky says, having feelings without any practice as regulating them. Meaning of Night is interested to see how long Switch Off has been around, because you're interested in what people's reactions on it have been, if we've only had one violent reaction. Or at least one deadly violent reaction. Aleph Sharp loved that we continued the panel shape indicating what type of scene is happening. John Numa says, also, the comment in control of your emotions fascinates me as both a commentary on humans and as what feels like an opportunity for foreshadowing. Everyone agrees the grandma, grandpa, or grandperson is so good. Fluffy Butt says, I find the use of human body language in an alien species to communicate with audience, I'm gonna guess, helpful. Grand Na! Oh, Grand Na is just the Grand Na. Dark of Night says, I was just noticing that's an excellent tide dimple on that first page. Well, I'm looking that up because I don't know what a tide dimple is. Shiny Marigold says, the kindness of strangers is a universal thing, apparently. Nope, that's not what I wanted. So this was like the biggest impulse purchase for me was my my iPad Pro here, which comes very much in handy because it's got the big screen. It is Black Lightning fanfic. Oh my god, that's so funny. Okay. Oh, the tie dimple is the little inset thing. They're good. You're good, and they're good. It's amazing. All right. I'm catching up because this is all too good. Tiramis, I like Scott McCloud's very snappy and easy to remember, juxtaposed pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence intended to convey information and or to produce an aesthetic response in the viewer. Zather enjoys the use of color as well. The strong yellow fear panel and red love lust tinted panels were a fun nod to lantern lore, as well as an effective shift in mood at those times. Lemon Eater says, only N.K. Jemisin could entice me to read a superhero book. Totally approve, but we'll watch out. Could lead to more. Like emotions, habit forming. Mikey Glinsky says, learning more about the alien physiology was fun. At first I thought the second murder victim was really messed up, chest all torn open. Turns out, nope, they're just like that. WDM says, Jamal Campbell does the line work, inks, and colors. He's one of my favorite artists working right now. Honestly, it's really incredible. Seratonia loves how the Na are named after the ships and space stations they lived on. When it says by the wavering sea, I was like, oh, as in, it feels as if a point of origin, the ship that carried you, and then in Marth's case, a third name that indicates he's super fancy. I think that's fascinating. And of, by, and until all being, what do they call those, prepositions? is a wonderful way of building on it, but I do assume they also have specific meanings. Olive Sharp says, I feel like the fact that we start with a Morpheus-style intro says something about the layers of seen truth in this world. We already know the sky is fake. Is that a clue to the sort of the image they present? Or what they want the city to believe about itself? They want the city to believe it's daytime, so they project a daytime sky out of the minds of everyone who lives there. It's an interesting potential metaphor, right? Namilla says, Tali Zora was Normandy. Yep. Yes, the nah thing reminds me of certain Mass Effect people, says Olive Sharp. Darkmanate says, I was complimenting the suit she was wearing when you mentioned that. A tie dimple is simply the natural fold in the tie knot, and tie aficionados, yes, they exist, will spend a lot of time on it. It indicates a high level of fine-tuned control for a Green Lantern, I think. Lemon Eater says, NK had a ton of fun with naming the trilogy species. Nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. Oh my god. Adat is so connected, and then somebody clue me in on the plant joke. Catoply. It's a great question. Nah, I'm good. Yeah, if someone decodes the Catoply name... Topiary, maybe? Ah, Elsharp has the same idea. WDM also recommends, if you're enjoying this, there's a book called Naomi, also illustrated by Jamal Campbell, that I loved. Esoteric authors now following. Thank you. All right. So we talked a little about Sisson's emotion speech. One of three little monologues that we get, sort of, in this issue. The first one is, I think, a fascinating encounter, and that is our brief conversation with Averup Thorne, the counselor of the Catoply people, who comes to the police station. Let's see, what did I write for this? The first murderer, the one who is now victim 2, was Mila Thorne, or Mela Thorne. This is where we get a lot of explanation of the genetic switch-off, genetic level emotion exploit and the switch-off. I loved particularly the panel on page 9 where Joe and Averup are reflected in the glass, and through the glass you are seeing the crime scene, the second crime scene. Just a beautifully framed and communicative. Averup explains essentially the predator instinct for the Catoply, and it's a very unusual one because it is about a spiritual communion and a sharing of souls and also eating people. I loved the phrase that he said there were misunderstandings when their species, which, like humans, I loved he was like, oh, we have that in common. We evolved more or less alone on our planet. And then there were misunderstandings in early contact with other species. He said, these creatures, so bold and bright, were not for eating. And of course, he drops that, you smell delicious. Always what you want to hear from a carnivore. And then makes the first reference to, at least with the exploit, we ask first. Which implies that sometimes people say yes. Go ahead and consume me, which makes me wonder, A, if there is a non-fatal version of that, or B, if it's just like a, sometimes that's how you opt to go. The beautiful page when Sisson is explaining the Catoply history, there's a full splash page where her face is in the corner, and you're watching the history play out in a series of panels. And the final one that might indicate one of the more recent developments is someone looking ecstatic, essentially, as Anna, confronts a about to feed Catoply. So, lots of questions. Mikey Glinsky says, it's the sweetest description of eating people I've ever read. Starpilot 6 thinks Catoply is an anagram for Toph-like, so it's an Avatar The Last Airbender reference. Okay, probably not. WDM says, this book gives me Star Trek vibes too. Definitely that I've been dropped here and I need to understand all of your deals so I know how to react and I can't tell who's dangerous, but you're all very interesting and several of you are sexy. That's very 60s Star Trek. Triana says the architecture reminds me of Mass Effect. For example, in that coffee scene, you get these sort of smooth structures, but I loved like the weird plant things that were on top of the bar that was between the sitting place and the kitchen. Was just a really beautiful little design. And that to me reminded me, like, plants obviously make me think of Katopli, but the way the Na are kind of fantasy themed creatures with their poison fins and their pointy ears might be like random plants on your architecture. Makes sense to me. Morton Solus asks if sentient creatures are the only thing they eat. What he says is that they evolved to prefer sentient food. And, let's see. Just checking the pieces of the... This beautiful page, which you can kind of see, where Averup explains, imagine yourself hollow, Lantern Mullen, aching with emptiness, cold with it, alone inside your own skin. And in the moment that you feed, warmth. Something fills you. Not merely flesh, but a presence. Another soul, as bright and strong as your own. My apologies. I forget you're new. So you're saying that without the emotion exploit, all Katopli might chow down on their fellow citizens because they're lonely? No. We might chow down because you smell delicious, Lantern. But at least with the emotion exploit, we ask first. And off he goes, not creepily into the night. Mikey Glinsky says the architecture is very classic iPod sci-fi, but also very not. It's strange, and I like it. Obsequious Diphthong says the cityscapes are interesting because we are dealing with the architectures of 3 different intelligent races coexisting. That's where we get those wonderful moments like, what kind of people would put an open-air chamber at a police station? Right, people with wings. It does make me think, is the police force primarily Na? Is it a mix of all 3? Anonymous, thank you for sending a gift sub to AM4N. Meaning of Night was like, I loved the note that they were like, thank God you can be sustained by our food, Joe. Like, what are you going to do as a Green Lantern if where you're stationed can't sustain you? Rations. John Numa says, talks about eating people. Now I must go do important things. Me. Literally says rooting around. But, so by this time we have had the, so we began this issue with a chase, right? I'm just going to start going piece by piece. Chasing after Murderer 2, who appears to be Na. So it could be vengeance for the first one, could be unrelated, because the first victim was Na. The AT-ATs are not involved in the murders yet, that we know of. We've seen Sojourner fly, and kind of struggle to fly. And adorable Grand Na says, is something wrong? Oh, you don't have any proper fins, do you? Poor thing. My granddaughter isn't very good at flying yet either. Panics on landings. Do you need help getting down, dear? Yes, ma'am. Anonymous gifted WDM1262 a sub. Welcome to the Enthusi Army. Starpod 6 says, it's a bit weird that they'd evolved to prefer eating intelligent races when they were the only race on their planet. I wonder if it's somehow tied to their reproduction or something. Well, it does say before aliens got there, they ate each other, which must have been an interesting basis for a society. Yet Morton Sola says it was pretty funny when she said she needed help getting down. We do see her accept help from a stranger, which I like. An anonymous gifter has gifted Morton Solus their 3rd month. Please enjoy your books, Morton. All right, we see all the techs cleaning up the crime scene. We know that Murderer 1 did have the exploit, but must have been on switch off for weeks. The important point that Joe says, just having emotions doesn't automatically make you crazy, i.e. a murderer in this case. She diverts to chase the counselor. They have their very revealing conversation. And then coffee, the most important scene, obviously, in this book so far. Mikey Glincy says, mini book club book fair? Thank you. Medium Knight liked that she wasn't too prideful about accepting help getting down. Darkham Nate says, gravity often trumps pride. Well, you would think it would, but I like that it shows she's pragmatic and not wildly rude. Mikey Glinski says, messing up a landing does have some hefty consequences. Oh, Zathra says, gravity is a habit that's hard to shake off. Makes a very nice follow-up to our small gods discussion. Is she the eagle or the tortoise? All right, so flirty coffee scene ensues. We get to know that she is at least hanging out off hours with Sizzin. They clearly still have a lot of chemistry. Sizzin keeps trying to make coffee. It is not successful. I love the line where she tells Sizzin that Thorn called her tasty, and Sizzin looks real shocked, and she goes, I mean, technically it wasn't a threat. Then there's the beautiful panel about Katopli history, and Sizzin gives Jo the insight into how to interpret the monologue 1. It's a spiritual thing, the ultimate interpersonal connection. You smell delicious means Avarup respects you. That's a useful connection, and you should take advantage of it. But it also means he wants to eat you. Don't ever forget that. And they're dropping this information while Jamal Campbell is just going wild with this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful page of horror. Friends don't let friends get chomped by sentient carnivorous plants. The carnivorous plants, of course, add a Little Shop air to all of this. WDM, I was like, this relationship is so cute. Atari Pinko says, is pointing out the obvious setups for jokes here. Which species is the murderer? Nah. No, someone clearly murdered these beings. Which species did it? Nah. You're being really combative for no reason. No, I mean, it's nah. I'm really getting mad at you. Well, that's why they have to suppress their emotions. Too many misunderstandings. Fluffy Butt says, those humans and their arsenic allergies. I think it's cyanide, but it was very funny, like, how was I to know? Meaning of Night says, I mean, you know that somebody like Carol Danvers would 100% crash into the ground before getting helped by a grandma. I feel like that's a coin flip. Mikey Glinsky says, points out, speaking of colors and emotions, it's interesting this whole scene is yellow tinted, or at least warm colored. Sizzin wears a yellow shirt, which is a traditional weakness of Green Lanterns, but can also indicate fear. But it's also a beautiful and warm color. So, is Jo afraid of how she feels about Sizzin? Is Sizzin actually a threat that we're getting a signal to because she's wearing yellow? Does she just look real good in yellow? It could be all of these things. Is Sizzin herself afraid? She's obviously afraid of losing control of her emotions. Then they tell each other that they're creepy, which I thought was sort of a beautiful bonding moment between aliens. Librarian Liz says it would depend on the grandma for Carol Danvers. If she was a fighter, sarcastic grandma, Carol might. I think it depends what mood she's already in. Dark of Night says sometimes yellow is just a primary color. Alright. Here we get some framing and body language. Definitely not sexy. And, like many detectives before her, Jo runs away from the big emotions feeling, and just tries to get into the case. I need a lead. Something I can pinch between my fingers and pull to unravel this mess, which I love. The textile metaphor is beautiful. And I do wonder, I don't know, but I wonder about Jo's background and training and all the things that make her who she is. If she can fabricate a suit, it indicates a level of knowledge of detail, like she knows how to make a tie fold. She knows this stuff. She has, and she compares things to unraveling. I just think it's interesting. We don't really know how she got from Earth to here, other than someone gave her a chance. M4N says, yellow roses mean friendship in, like, flower language. That could be very significant. These little flowers that are on top of the bar. Oh, I made the page turn. I'm going to make sure I'll have paper ones for future. All right. They call each other creepy. We're on to the case. She's trying to talk to witnesses. She's looking at unuseful video footage. And she's going to follow up on an earlier lead. She's arriving at, oh, don't mind me. I'm just relaxing here in my weird, sexy bed. Counselor Marth. Let's talk about Counselor Marth. Darkwing Knight says, she has admittedly put a lot more detail into her construct outfit than I ever would. It doesn't 100% mean expertise in those areas, because we've seen Green Lanterns make themselves clothes and things before, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they understand the intricacies of fabric construction. Sometimes it's just like comic book things. You know, if they need to make an outfit, they can make an outfit. They don't have to take a course. Secret Diphthong says, but not our kind of fish people. So what's yellow in fish language? Tuna? As we get to Marth, Lemonator says, can you frame this in the broader Green Lantern universe, which is all new to me? What I like is that I think, and let me know if I'm wrong, but I think so far you don't need to know much, other than Green Lanterns are kind of space cops. They usually have an area, their jurisdiction. This is a way far away area that's not part of any of the established sectors. You get a nice little lore drop when Sizzin says, Green Lanterns are famous throughout the 3,600 sectors for their bravery. And Joe's like, nice dare, buddy. So this is a far sector. It's not one of the standard parts of their area, which is basically, usually most of everything is their area. Now, they were established by a group of ancient beings to help keep the peace, essentially. They're supposed to be galactic peacekeepers. There's usually one of them assigned to a huge area because most problems do not need a Green Lantern's attention. But, you know, if someone's trying to destroy your planet, you call a Green Lantern for help. In this case, if you think you might have the first murder in 500 years, even if you don't have a Green Lantern, you might reach out to be like, can you send a space cop? We think we might have a problem. And Joe's like, interesting that you called me. Okay, wow, there is a murder. That's not good. Oh no, there's another murder. I am new here. I'm figuring all of this out. What is your deal? How can I help? And also, how do I literally stop more people from dying? So that's the job, right? Now, usually there's only one lantern for a big area of space. Because we love to have lots of stories set on Earth, Earth has a ton of Green Lanterns. But that's just because they've kind of accumulated over time, and a bunch of them are all so great that none of us want any of them to stop existing. So we just keep adding more to the bunch. In the Space Cop version of things, which originates with Hal Jordan, storytelling-wise, the second person to pick up the ring was Jon Stewart. And that is who you see in the little cute doll on Joe's desk. And Jon Stewart's a wonderful, beloved piece of comic book history. He's a great character. He's an architect and a Marine. So you see how that plays to this make things with your mind quality and his discipline. The key elements for Green Lanterns is willpower or fearlessness. There's different interpretations of that, but in usual Green Lantern mythology, you use the power of your will or your fearlessness to make the ring, to control the power of this magic ring that you have. It's not officially magic, but it's easiest to think of it that way. And make what's usually a green-shaped thing like the hands Joe uses to clear the hallway. That's called a construct. The hands are a construct. They can touch things. They can interact with stuff. The lantern has other powers, like it usually has translation. The ring has other powers, like usually there's translation. Sometimes it can make a protective bubble for you to fly around in space if you can't breathe in space. And in most versions of Green Lantern mythology, that ring has a charge that needs to be recharged by use of what is called a power battery. Those are the things shaped like lanterns that make that logo you see on the thing. It is a lantern, as in the light casting kind, but it's actually a power battery. That thing recharges the ring. Joe doesn't seem to have one. Or at least we haven't seen it, and we know her ring is unusual. So if you already know Green Lantern stuff, you wonder, how did you get assigned way out here? What was your path into the Green Lantern Corps, if you're officially a member, which it seems like you are because you refer to yourself as a lantern. A lantern is their title. I am a Green Lantern. I am part of the Green Lantern Corps. How did you get here? Who trained you and gave you this assignment? Clearly someone hands her that ring. Usually the ring chooses you when the previous lantern of your sector dies. It says you have demonstrated the ability to overcome great fear. you welcome to the Green Lantern Corps. And then somebody shows up and trains you and explains what's going on. Ideal circumstances, rarely the case when you're getting a new ring, because usually it's someone who did not plan to suddenly die. So that makes for some great dramatic moments. But however she got this assignment, and however she ended up out here, she is part of that broader universe. Now, the color thing. Traditionally, Sinestro, a Green Lantern kind of gone bad, wore yellow, and yellow was a weakness of the Green Lanterns. They were powerless against the color yellow. It is one of these silly bits of 60s sci-fi mythology. The World War II era Green Lantern, which we're not going to get too much into, was weak against wood, literally trees. It's just kind of how it works. Part of what makes that great is that magic having rules and limitations, and again, this is not technically magic, makes for more interesting storytelling challenges. But over time, the yellow is associated with fear. If your power to control your constructs is fear, and yellow, a color traditionally associated with cowardice in some things, in what we hope is separate from its other connotations, but like, if yellow means fear and green means willpower, then the contrast between them now acquires a metaphorical meaning that makes more sense than literally just like, oh no, you have a yellow shirt, I can't punch you with my Green Lantern hand. Not that goofy Silver Age 60 stuff isn't lots of fun. So, originally green and yellow were the two colors for a long time that were involved here. And then when Jeff Johns was writing Green Lantern, they developed and expanded an entire rainbow mythology. Now there are a bunch of different cores. I skipped over the Star Sapphires who get turned into the Violet Core, but we'll save some things for later. Fast forward to the early 2000s, mid-2000s, Green Lantern comics are having a big resurgence. Hal Jordan's been brought back to life. Long story. But now different emotions power the rings or the core for different kinds of lanterns. And it's one of, in my opinion, the best, most successful expansions of an established mythology, because once they go there, it feels like it was always this way. It's easy to forget that there wasn't a Blue Lantern Corps and an Indigo Corps and a Yellow Lantern Corps and all this stuff before. So, that is backstory to why people are like, ooh, what do the colors mean? So, violet is love, red is anger, orange is greed or avarice, blue is compassion. Nope, blue is hope, and indigo is compassion. And yellow is fear, obviously. Now, the ways that those function are different for every emotion, because not every emotion is the same or works the same. And that's part of what made those stories so much fun. But the truth is, I don't think you need to know any of that to read this comic. It's just fun. But that's why we're like, oh, is the yellow significant? Should we be thinking of anger when we see red? Should we be thinking of love when we see violet? Out of curiosity, what color? Oh, what colors all over Counselor Marth's house? It's violet. You can't see it on my iPad. A thing that I'm not sure I completely 100% picked up until literally I was sitting here discussing it with all of you. Ay, 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 ay. All right. Skipping back up a bit. Heart of Handprints, have a great video conference. Catching the rest of the discussion on VOD. Thank you, thank you. All right. So, we brought up Marth. WDM says, this guy. Mikey Glinty says, oof. Anonymous just gave a gift sub to Namilus. Thank you so much. Mini of Night says, Marth needs to take several steps back. Shani Marigold says, so full of himself. OMG. But also, as Joe, it's what, like, he's like, hello, I am sexy. And Joe is like, correct, but also complicated. Corpse Sandler says, very yummy, also very scary. WDM says, he has so much big energy. Corpse Sandler says, I mean... Morton Sola says, her inability to control her ring makes me wonder just how far is this world? Far enough away it doesn't matter if she screws up? Atari Pinko says, Amy's wearing lots of blue. Are you feeling hopeful today? It is funny that, like, it is one of my, maybe my favorite core, and blue is one of my favorite colors. Dark of Nate says, Green Lanterns tend to be, thank you, Anonymous, for the gift sub to Aromia Fleiss. Welcome to the Enthusi Army. Green Lanterns tend to be fearless, strong-willed, imaginative. The lanterns who specialize in each of those produce different personalities and ways of wielding the ring, which is so much fun. Mikey Glinsky says, even if you don't know what a Green Lantern is, it does read as Space Cop with some kind of colorful superpowers. It tracks pretty well, I'm glad. WDM says, Marth has so much big energy, he gives me Gilmore vibes. Librarian Liz shouts, all the lanterns! Real Brainwave says, yeah, he gives off big Gilmore energy. Shiny Marigold says, Marth is all, hey baby, how's it going? And Joe is all, are you serious right now? You're ridiculous, go away, but also, I kinda like it. Which is one of these, you have to walk such a careful line when somebody's like, hey, but in Joe's case, she seems fully in control and maybe into it, and she gets to decide for herself whether she is. Talk of Nate says, I just thought of 8 human Green Lanterns without even really trying, so... Atari Pico says, Earth has too many. Well, that's how stories are like that. There are way too many, though. You're right. Real Brainwave points out the constructs are made of hard light. Atari Pinko points out, traditionally, the recharge period is once a day. We get lots of, I'm over hell. I mean, do we really need Gardner? Lots of contrasting opinions on the lanterns. But what I love about it is every lantern is somebody's favorite, you know? Fluffy but likes how Joe's construct hands have fancy fingernails. I love that detail. Now, are they her own fingernails, or are they the fingernails of the person who gave her the ring, which look very nice and fancy? Mikey Glinsky says, and why does your ring look like Cthulhu? Shadows of Life says it's a special ring. WDM says issue 3 is going to answer that question a bit. Ooh, exciting. We're mostly keeping no spoilers, but I like that as a teaser. Atari Pinko says Geo rings are now seen as alien supercomputers. Ooh, M4In is sharing an insightful interview with N.K. Jemisin. Reminding us of the spoiler policy. Zather thinks the rings look as more plant-like ivy-viney motif than tentacly. Goblin Wars mostly knows Green Lantern from the Super Friends cartoon. Everybody's got to weigh in. Shiny Marigold says, green is a blend of blue and yellow, so how does that work? Actually, I think that might increase the poetic power. A combination of hope and fear drives your willpower. Did they point this out and I just never noticed it? Because the combinations are so good. Greed, of course, is a combination of rage and fear. That's exactly how they behave. They're scared you'll take their stuff. They're angry at what they don't have and everyone who might want the things that they have and who has things they don't have. Wait, what's the third composite color? Non-primary. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue. Violet is a mix of red and blue. Right? Hope and anger make love. Interesting. Those are definitely elements of it. Okay, sorry. John Newman says, do we need this background as a beginner? No! But this is fascinating. Scott Pack is now following. Thank you! It's the real plus minus of working in an established universe. If you want to, you have this incredible richness to draw on. But that can get in the way for folks who don't want to be, who can't be expected to know all this stuff instantly. What I love about this comic is that it says, look, if you know all that stuff, you're asking questions in the background and it's fascinating. But if you don't, Space Cop, pretty superpowers, let's go. It's a difficult balancing act to pull off because you don't want to ignore those rich possibilities and you want to make something that stands alone. But I think they're nailing it, is just what I'm saying. And a little rage kitty. Sorry, the anger-based lanterns have a cat and he's the cutest. Not getting into the white and black lanterns, Shadows of Life. It's a whole thing. Look to the stars for hope burns bright. Artist, why are you so good? All right. Romeo Flies him good. Sinfully Wicked still has a huge crush on Kyle Rayner. Mikey Glinski goes, oh, geez, that's who he reminded me of, Gilmore. Simply Wicked says, I'm all about the Star Sapphires. That's the violet ones who use love. After they remove some of the problematic femme fatale stuff. That stuff has not aged great. It's very funny, some of the old ones. Before there was a Rainbow Core, Star Sapphire was a bad guy who came to Earth to mind control men with love. Comics. Ha! Robin Winghood says, constructs made of hard light is quite a sentence to stumble in on. Oh, lanterns! Oh, yay. Robin Winghood is doing a very unusual lantern oath from a particularly wonderful standalone story. All right. All right. Yeah, my whole mind was maybe blown. Didn't think it through. All right. Skimming back forward a little bit. Mikey Glinski points out the Green Lantern seem more linear wavelength based rather than color wheel based as an art. Magenta, red, purple in that case doesn't actually exist. Makes sense. Robin Winghood says, I sometimes get so tripped up by Lantern stuff because thanks to the Justice League Unlimited cartoons, my default Lantern is Jon Stewart. He makes as great a default as anybody. Key Squared says, I feel like Marth is going to turn out to have a really interesting backstory once we get into it. All right. So, Marth. That's how we got here. So, Marth. The third character who we're going to get a close little talk with. Which, now that I say all of this out loud, sounds like a suspect interrogation structure, but in our case, just reads like a nice world-building exercise, right? Going around, getting a nice little talk with Averup Thorne, a nice little talk with Cizin of the Cliffs, and a nice little talk with Counselor Marth. But they don't just talk. There is a 2-page spread. In issue 1, we got a beautiful 2-page spread of the scope of space, of the city enduring, this incredible achievement, this unbelievably enormous megalopolis made up of floating stations that are their own mini-cities, with 3 sentient species with a complicated history living out at the edge of the universe, the majesty of space and mystery. And in this issue, we get a 2-page scene of an amazing dance moves. Let's talk about this. The dance moves, the clues, and the big revelation at the end of episode 2. Cizin might never touch the stuff, but Counselor Marth is on switch off. M4 in says, now I'm scanning back to all the yellow tinted panels to see how fear might play a role in that narrative. Love this stream. They dance, says Corpse Handler. Shiny Marigold says, the dancing was beautifully done. It does feel like they dared themselves. What's the hardest thing that we could possibly try to portray in comics? Dancing. And they did it! Fluffybot wants to know how the flying creatures dance. It is interesting. Which moves are they coming from? If these are the moves that are popular in this sector, it is interesting that more Na moves don't involve flying. Or maybe Marth is just intentionally choosing the ones that can be done on the ground. Or maybe the pressure of the ground against your feet is part of what makes this particular mode of dancing fun. Interestingly, also says the Katopli are masters of harmony and percussion. So the plant carnivores are the highly developed musical society. I love the way Joe says, I'm afraid I don't know any dances that are popular in this sector. I wanted to, you almost want to follow up where he's like, okay, now teach me your earth moves. Aleph Sharp loved that you can actually follow the order of moves in the dance from the layout. The art of guiding an eye across a page is such a wonderful, essential but invisible component of comics. In this case, the music notes help to guide your eye, but you also, in theory, with one background, are looking at a million little points of time, which is a technique I absolutely love. Jim Lee does it for fight scenes in Hush. It was done memorably by Marie Severin in Hulk. She would do repeated faces for transformation, I believe is what I'm thinking of. But it's one of these wonderful little comic book language things. Rather than traditionally panel, next moment in time, next moment in time, watching multiple moments in time that combine to make one mood or sequence in one giant 2-page spread where the panels themselves are dissolving, which might lend to the feeling that this is a self-contained moment and that there is abandon. There's no barrier between these moments. They flow into each other, which goes with both the dance and romance interpretations. Shiny Marigold says, the whole spread had such movement and flow. Yes. Obsequious Diphthong says, I mean, the switch-off revelation was fairly foreshadowed in my opinion, but nice to have in-comic confirmation. I didn't suspect it before the scene happened, but when Joe comments on the emotion-based words that Martha's using, and, like, shall I share you such delights, thrilled, amazed, the language is doing that, the art is doing that, his expressions. What's interesting is even in the council scenes, everybody always looks like they're having emotions, but Marth does so more. They don't seem muted at all with that guy. And finally, without needing to be told, Joe just figures that thing out. Robin Winghood says, I feel like swing would work, weirdly, with its emphasis on, like, contained momentum. Dark of Nate says they probably have dances that are specifically interspecies. Goblin Wars says, I think some birds are constantly dancing. Robin Winghead says, man, now I want to doodle flying dancing. That could be wild. Aleph Sharp says it's also been done in Lois Lane number 7 recently as a double-page spread for a fight. It's a pretty, it is one of the, it is a tool used effectively in a lot of places in comics, but it's one of my faves. Hey, Geeky Chappy. And Shiny Marigold points out, also violet tinged. Just saying. This entire dance sequence is violet tinged. Star Pilot 6 says, I mean, we don't actually know he's on switch off yet. Joe could be wrong. But yeah, he seems like he's on switch off. Obsequious Diphthong says, I caught some hints in the scene in issue 1 where she's leaving the council meeting, but it certainly wasn't confirmed until this issue. Shiny Marigold says, and she's having this realization as Marth says, let's talk about murder, because that's not worrisome at all. Darkfate66 is now following. Thanks, welcome. Starpilot 6 says, for all we know, some people might naturally not have the emotion exploit working normally, though. I feel like that would have come up in the world-building conversation so far. We don't know yet, though. You're right. All right. We learn a little bit more about the naming. About this where we hear Ship Clan, the Wavering Dark. Stephen of the Wavering Dark is victim 1. Marth, of course, is of the Wavering Dark as well. Or he's by the Wavering Dark. He is... Sorry, I wrote down the exchange where Joe says, you are not subtle. And he says, I really don't know how to be. Stephen of the Wavering Dark was victim 1. Marth of the Sea by the Wavering Dark until the sun falls is our counselor here. Peace Captain Sizzin is Sizzin of the Cliffs by the Streaking Ice. She lists a different ship. Joe lists a different ship name when she's explaining ship clans. It says the Sentinel of Quiet and the Streaking Ice are 2 examples. We know Averip Thorn is of the Dry Season Thorns, and Murderer 1 is Myla Thorn, who's also victim 2. But he says Thornton's a very common name. They only use surnames for the comfort of aliens. And we've also got a couple of or at least one @name so far, @Blaze of Glory. We don't know who's designing Switch Off, and we don't know who's distributing it. But we do know, as she says, oh hell, this is a goddamn problem. He's on Switch Off. Beautiful, does not... A gorgeous, good-looking picture, but also not one that indicates being completely in control of anything, much less emotions. As he says, so Joe, let's talk about murder. And the quote at the end of this one, the quote that starts issue 1 is Shinwa Akebe from Things Fall Apart. This one ends with a quote from Zora Neale Hurston, the beloved novelist. Grab the broom of anger and drive off the beast of fear. Now, of course... She was probably not talking about the Green Lantern Corps when she said that, but it is an interesting quote in the context of people who find themselves safer if they do not have emotions. This one says, defeat one emotion with another. Let one drive you to drive off the other. And it contains references to emotion, defense, and predation, the beast of fear. So who's angry, or who should be angry, or who needs to get angry? And what does it tell us about this? Mikey Glinsky says the emotions in the scene were all over the place, kind of like an alien species that has them but isn't practiced in controlling them. No relation. Key Squared says it might not come up if the emotion exploit doesn't work for anybody. It might not come up if the only people we're talking to are people in positions of authority who wouldn't want to admit there's a flaw in their grand plan. Also, a thing I find very interesting is people get murdered for a lot of reasons, and they aren't all emotional outbursts. So are, Columbo-style murders where somebody wants to get rid of a rival in business or something like that, do they not happen here, or are they super well covered up here? Zather points out about the ship clans, there was apparently some political-ish tension even within the ship clan. Shiny Marigold says, not all Catoplia are related, Joe! Facepalm. Robin Winghood smacks Sinestro with a broom. Librarian Liz says, these are emotional too, just different kinds of emotion, longer scale. But are they truly operating without even suppressed greed being enough to do that? Aleph Sharp has a weird feeling maybe people can pay for Catoplia assassins for that purpose, therefore no body, but maybe that's just my mind. Namilla says, I just started reading issue 1, and apparently this is the first murder in 500 years. That is some very good covering up. Dark of Nate says this is weirdly reminiscent of our first read for book club, in the Left Hand of Darkness, where they didn't have war, but people murdered each other all the time. So, and once again, we're doing all this crazy sci-fi stuff and all this philosophical emotional reflection while we're also following a detective who needs to solve a murder that might have been prompted by an illegal drug that she's just realized one of the high-ranking politicians who she is flirt/interrogating with is on the illegal drug. Bum, bum, bum! There is not trouble in paradise. Obsequious Diphthong says they apparently have property crimes, so greed is probably still present. So that's issue 2 of Far Sector. Out of curiosity, how would people feel about number 3, and how long would you want to get to that before we talk about it? Book club is always one of my favorite things I have going on, but I am extra super excited and grateful that I get to do it with y'all right now in this time where I can still do it from my house, because that's where it happened before. Would we be ready for number 3 next week? Would 2 weeks be better? We're going to run out soon because there are only 4 issues so far. Let's see. Zather says, can we talk about the sky shift on page 9 with the damn I'm tired green bubble? Which is also classic detective speak. I think my page numbering might be off. For me, it's page 11, but... Yeah, he says good evening, Thorne does, as he leaves. And then there's sort of a sunset-looking picture. And it's unclear, but I assume some time has passed. And Joe is very tired. It looks like it's day now. What's your read on it, Zather? WDM says, yes, number 3, it's so good. Alex Sharp is down for either a week or 2. Zather says, normally I think that was elapsed time, but in this weird alien world, it's hard to say. Mikey Glinsky says, 2 weeks was a good time frame, but I'm down with whatever. M4In says, next week. WDM says, I can reread it. Real Brave Wave has it, so good whenever. Starpod 6 says, I feel like most of us have a lot of extra time on our hands. Aleph Sharp points out issue 5 is out March 25th, so theoretically, if it's 2 weeks, that could be enough time for people to get number 5 after. We still have 3 and then 4. Yeah. Let's go ahead and read number 3 for next week for book club, okay? 1 week. I'll put this YouTube backup up sooner so people have a little more time. So it's 3:29. Sorry, it's 3:19 right now. It'll be 3:26 next week, and we will plan to read issue 3 of Far Sector. All right. Please keep sharing resources on how to track these down. I do apologize. I try to stick to things that we can get in audio and from libraries, but I wanted to try out a comic, and I'm really excited about this one. So, issue number 3 will be our next book club. We will meet next week. And now, after a short break, it is time to play some King's Quest. Thank you so much, everybody, for contributing and talking today in book club with me. I love doing this so much. You're all my faves. And check Discord to see if you need a set of issues. Aleph Sharp might be able to help you. Down Under Dwarf says, I've been busy at work, but will need to be part of the VOD squad. Bye, y'all. Stay safe. Librarian Liz says, now the book club is done. I have to go, but I have a wonderful King's Quest. Atari Pico says, so pretty. Such a pretty book. Which I think we can all agree on. All right. Short break. And we'll be back for King's Quest.